Hello and welcome, subscribers, to the first Gaming Muse video of 2015. And the first video I've made in a long time. It seems I'm simply doomed to fail to keep a routine schedule. Life and school and a ton of other shit keeps getting in the way. But onto the subject at hand. I promised you a new symbolism series, and by golly, you're gonna get one. So here we go. Silent Hill Symbolism, the Location series. Our first stop on our grand tour of the haunted town is Brookhaven Hospital. As per usual, I start my research with a name, in particular, the hospital's name, Brookhaven. It's a pretty typical place name. I've seen it used for buildings, for streets, all sorts of stuff. And it doesn't seem to refer to any formal famous place. But we can divide this word into smaller words, called morphemes, or the smallest individual units of meaning in a language. When we do that, we get two words, brook and haven. When I think of a brook, I think of a river or stream, but the actual oldest definition of the word is to use, possess, hold, which eventually developed into a sense of putting up with something, to endure, to tolerate. The river definition actually derives from a different root word, and I'm about to really disappoint my Old English professor with this pronunciation, but the Old English brook, as opposed to the Old English brokan, which is more than you ever wanted to know about that word. But it brings us to an interesting point. Which brook is implied in the name of the hospital? It is certainly something to be endured, a place that has to be survived rather than, say, enjoyed. There are ways we could interpret it as a river, too, as a place ever-changing, a place that flows and moves. It's especially poignant when you consider the second morpheme in the word. Haven is both a noun and a verb. As a noun, it is defined as a recess or inlet of the sea, or the mouth of a river, affording good anchorage and a safe station for ships. Eventually, over time, it comes to simply mean a place of shelter, safety, or retreat. So, we've got a haven, a place of safety, which must be endured, because it's not really safe at all. Every Silent Hill game involves a hospital. Why? Because they're terrifying. Hospitals are the physical embodiments of some of humanity's worst fears. Illness, suffering, death, loss, pain. What goes on there is just gross. There's a certain amount of violence going on in them every day, normalized violence in the form of life-saving surgeries. But life-saving or not, no one likes them. People are terrified of them. We have cultural horror stories of people being forced under the knife, and historical cases of it actually happening, and of anesthesia fading off and people waking up in the middle of surgery, cut open. Ugh. Why do these things scare us so? Obviously, pain is a part of it. If you're in the hospital, you're probably hurting, and a lot of the healing methods do harm as well. The possibility of death is another obvious reason. But at its heart, there's one reason why we really, really don't like hospitals. Vulnerability. Hospital patients don't have a lot of power or control over themselves or their fates. They're subject to the doctor's care, dependent upon others for survival. During surgery, they are completely vulnerable to the surgeon's actions. They can't save themselves. They may need help for the most everyday activities. So it's no wonder that Silent Hill, a game all about making players feel afraid and helpless, uses hospitals to help create that effect. Brookhaven Hospital began, we learn, in the 1800s as a Civil War hospital. Wars are never pretty, but the American Civil War was really not pretty. The medical practices of the time, the brutality of the war, the lack of medical knowledge, it all comes together in a twisted blend to create, well, scenes like this. Which means from the beginning, Brookhaven was a place of great pain and a lot of death. In Silent Hill, places like that tend to get nasty. But let's stop beating around the bush and actually start examining the symbolism involved in this level. Brookhaven appears in the series in games 2 and 3, and its appearance changes pretty drastically. The first time we see it, it's dark and wet. The other world, everything is covered up and hidden, and almost everything in it is muted and monochromatic. It's the perfect setting for this story. What happens in dark, wet places? Nothing good. Dark and wet just sounds uncomfortable, but it's also the perfect setting for things to mold. And this is a game about mold of the spirit specifically, how James has become rotten within himself. All the walls and furniture are covered, hiding everything, just as James is covering up and hiding things from himself. There's a lot of blatant religious imagery here, which makes sense given it's a hospital. A lot of people find comfort in their faith, or even discover their faith, in this place. The Lady of the Door is a painting on one of the doorways in the hospital that's related to a puzzle. The image is very similar to Renaissance in style and subject matter. There's a religious tone in the body posture and the words of the puzzle. The woman is an angel after all, and the style is reminiscent of Renaissance-style religious artwork. Everything in the story is done for a reason. Why this picture and why this style of art? Consider the time period. The Renaissance was a period of artistic flourishing, where a shift began from the conservative, faith-focused society to a world more ruled by reason and rationality. But it was still a time where religion was very important, and art was a part of that worship. The religious paintings of saints and holy folk such as Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ, were considered themselves sort of objects of worship, like shrines, if you will. They were more than just art. It's not a coincidence that this painting is of a woman, specifically focused on one woman, who is defined by the riddle as holy. This is a game that uplifts women in relation to the men in their lives, particularly James. Here, James is being judged by a holy female figure, and he's found wanting. But we're just talking about the hospital today, so let's move on. In the third game, we see a very different version of Brookhaven. The layout is the same, but there are some new locations to explore, most notably, the morgue. Heather's story is one of loss and death, but it's specifically about that first death, the first experience of loss that every child, teenager, and young adult is eventually forced to face. It happens at different times, but it always happens. Death is not a real experience for young people until it happens to them. James is an adult, and adults have, through their longer lives, experienced loss and death. It's an aspect of life they've already been forced to face up to and acclimate to. But Heather's only 17, and her father's death is likely the first death she's ever experienced and seen with her own eyes. Her hospital contains a morgue because her story is all about facing and accepting death, about growing up and becoming an adult that can handle loss in a mature way. James accepts death. It's accepting his role in that death that he has trouble with. Another big difference is the otherworld. As I've said, James's otherworld is cold, dark, and secluded. Heather's is hot and in your face. James's otherworld emphasizes his sorrow and his loneliness, but it's somewhat tame as far as otherworlds go. There's no grates, there's little distortion of reality. The hospital looks basically like a hospital, granted a really rusty and nasty one. James is an adult, like I've said, and his story deals with aspects of adulthood. Every adult becomes accustomed to doctors and hospitals. They have to deal with many procedures that are required of them, from having blood drawn to colonoscopies. Teenagers don't. Doctor visits might lead to a shot or a small blood sample taken, but the more invasive and painful procedures don't happen until you're much older. What does that mean? Hospitals are familiar to adults, and given his wife's condition, they would be very familiar to James. That doesn't mean they lose their horror, just their mystery. See, for young people, hospitals contain an extra level of fear of the unknown. Until you've experienced it, you can't know what something is like, and all those hospital procedures adults face are mysteries for young adults. Heather's hospital is violent, bright red and vivid. Bodies and gurneys are everywhere and covered in wiggling bloody lines. The hospital is alien and terrifying, just like a real hospital would be to a young person. It's another aspect of Heather's journey to adulthood. Brookhaven's no ordinary hospital. The padded cells, the types of illnesses the patients are being treated for, this is a hospital for the mentally ill. What does that mean for our story? It's perfect for Silent Hill 2, because James, and most of the rest of the cast, are definitely mentally ill. Depression, anxiety, mania, all of these and more are present in the actions of the characters. It's a story that deals with the consequences of and the pains caused by specific types of mental illness. So Brookhaven, as this type of hospital, ties it deeply to the larger themes of the story. It also foreshadows Mary's death. While all hospitals are inclined to abuse, mental hospitals, especially in the United States, have historically been very abusive. The practices and treatments of patients were horrid, and the ill were not treated with the respect and care they deserved. And the same exact thing happened to Mary. A person in a position of power over her, her caretaker, mistreated and killed her. Heather's hospital gets a little weird. Rooms change, ritual sacrifices appear to have been performed, bodies hang upside down in lockers. It's almost more like what a fictional nightmare hospital might look like from one of those horror movies teenagers love so much. Hey, we might be onto something here. I think part of the reason Brookhaven looks so strange and eerie in 3 is because it's influenced by Heather's young mind, which likely imagines a more twisted version of what nightmares can be. Brookhaven is the start of what will later become a trend in Silent Hill series. The exploration of all the fears associated with hospitals, with death and illness, particularly with mental illness. Downpour will take these themes and run with them, including one of the best hospital levels since the 3rd game. But no hospital in the series will be quite like Brookhaven, aging, haunted, and tormented by the pains of those whose voices have gone for too long unheard. Well, that's it for my first video this year. I hope you enjoyed it. I plan to have one ready soon, but as I said, I'm really busy with work and school and all sorts of things. But if you like what I do and you want to help support it, please check out my Etsy store. I have got lots of video game merchandise, Silent Hill included, and it would really help me out and make it so that I can have more time and more free time to make videos rather than sitting around trying to make money. Well, that's it. See you next time.